Hello, my lovely humans. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. Hi, if you're new, you can click the subscribe button and hit the little bell if this is the kind of content that interests you. What is the content I have? A little bit of everything. So if you want to see life and share life, this is a channel for you. But today we are going to talk about is the possible changing of a life in the law, because in South Carolina, we are talking about the appeal of Alex Murdaugh. For those of you who don't know, Alex Murdaugh is a former lawyer who was disgraced after he was arrested for the murder of his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul, who was 16 at the time. And Maggie and Paul were both shot down at the family home in Moselle, because they actually had multiple places where they stayed. But their main farm place that they lived was Moselle, and outside by the kennels in the back is where Maggie and Paul were when Maggie was shot in the front and Paul was shot in the back of the head, found facing forward. And Alex Murdaugh was convicted of killing them, and the motivation that the prosecution put forth was the financial situation, because of his doing drugs, stealing from clients, and using multiple fraudulent lawyer schemes. Alex Murdaugh was finding himself in a lot of financial hot water, which was about to get worse because Paul Murdaugh was also about to be indicted, or was indicted and going to be investigated for the death of another teenager, Mallory Beach. So Paul Murdaugh was found underage drinking and was driving his family boat, which he then crashed, which led to the injury of most of his friends and the death of Mallory Beach. And with all the investigating and things happening, etc., there was a lot of scrutiny about to happen. There has also been multiple other mysterious deaths under the Murdaugh household, including a housekeeper and a friend, acquaintance of the other sons, who was found dead shortly up their road. Okay. Dogs had a lot of connections in the town that they lived in Carlton County. But they also had another problem with the trial, and that is Becky Hill. We'll touch on how she connects to / ruins a whole bunch of stuff. And poor Creighton Waters was under the gun with the appellate court. Creighton Waters was the prosecutor, and he was representing himself, which is fascinating because usually there's somebody else who goes to the appellate court, that is the Court of Appeals. And how this is different from a normal trial is there's a panel of judges whose job is to just read through transcripts. So everything that the stenographer writes or talks into to record everything that's going down, every word that is said by every person, and evidentiary matters that are brought up, every witness, etc. They read through the whole transcript, and then they are there to determine if an appeal is necessary, if a sentence needs to be knocked down, if something needs to be dismissed, or if a mistrial needs to be granted. Now, a mistrial means that a dismissal means we're dropping all the charges, like this doesn't continue any further, everyone goes on with their lives. A mistrial means that there was something terribly wrong with the first trial, and if it is a mistrial without prejudice, that means that it can be reopened again, and they just have to start all over. Whole new trial, who this? Coming up. And so this panel of judges, they will ask the lawyers questions about the transcript, and they will give them a chance to answer it, and then they will determine how they want the appeal to go. Now, most of the time in appellate court, they ask very pointed, leading, direct questions about specific things that they think are iffy or sus in the transcripts. And then once they are satisfied or not satisfied with the answers, they will then determine, usually taking several months, because again, they're reading and keeping up with every other appeal that happens, because every convicted criminal goes through the appeal process. And most of the time they're like, no, we didn't see any major wrongdoings in how the judge did this. We would make these same rulings if we were in that judge's place. All of these objections seem substantial, blah, blah, blah. The ruling is as is, this person stays convicted. Or sometimes, yeah, we think this was a bit extreme. We're going to knock this sentence down a little bit. Usually the appeal isn't as in the defendant's favor as they would like. However, with Alex Murdaugh, it's a little different. One, because of the case that Creighton Waters had prepared. So again, he was charged. His trial was about the murder of his wife and son. However, a large part of the trial, if you were not there, was financial crimes, embezzlement, and all the other stuff we talked about. And there was a lot of emphasis about that, including his former CFO, who initially was clocking some weird stuff and came forward with the information. She was like, this seemed weird. This wasn't okay. We had questions, but the questions and the suspicious stuff was delayed and put off for investigating when Alex Murdaugh's family was found deceased. And so they put the suspicious work-related stuff on the shelf in lieu of being empathetic and compassionate towards Alex's loss. However, we see in the Corey Richins trial how the financial crimes that Corey has been alleged of doing and the alleged murder of her husband are two separate trials. And based on the questions that the appellate judges were asking Creighton Waters, they were absolutely feeling like the prosecution had just dumped everything and anything onto the jury's lap. Not only does this make for a more confusing case, because there was a lot of times of, wait, is this a murder trial or is this a blue-collar crime trial? Because there was so much of the financial stuff in it. Now, you're allowed to mention some financial stuff when it is a motive or character analysis, situation, etc., but it can only be kind of tangentially touched on. It shouldn't be your main case. And the financial crimes where they had the most substantial hardcore evidence was most of Creighton Waters' tactic against Alex Murdaugh. And the rest of the actual murder-related stuff was more circumstantial. And Creighton Waters was leaning so heavily into the blue-collar crime of it all because that was where he, again, had the most hardcore, direct, straightforward evidence. And it was very much a revelation of he lied to everybody. He lied about everything. And when Alex Murdaugh took the stand in his own defense, I don't think he did himself any favors when he got on that stand, but he did try. And the appellate court also was really interested in Becky Hill. And this is why I absolutely think I'm leaning towards he's going to get a new trial. Alex Murdaugh is going back to trial to try and free himself again. And that is because of all the stuff that was brought up. Some stuff that was not brought up in the initial trial that was brought up in the appeals court with Becky Hill, who's a former county clerk for Carlton County, South Carolina. She was the county clerk. Now, the county clerk is the person who the jurors have a lot of interaction with. She's the person who they contact. Where do I park? What am I supposed to wear? Can I bring a sweater? When can I take my medicine? Etc. All of those sort of logistic things go through the county clerk. She's the one who's like, all the jurors are here, Your Honor. We need a bailiff over here. Can someone do an escort? You know, she's doing the head count and she's keeping track of expenses, doing all of those things. She's a clerk. But Becky Hill was doing more than just making sure the jurors got the right lunch. She was also doing things like hinting to them that Alec Murdaugh was a liar. She had been known, now this had already come up in a previous motion to dismiss from the defense. And there was a whole nother trial that was interviewing the jurors to ask them if they had been influenced or impacted by Becky Hill, because she had been heard saying and talking to the jurors about things like, watch his body language, don't let the defense fool you, suggesting that whatever the defense and Alex Murdaugh had to say were all total and complete lies. And then there was the incident with the egg juror. That might sound ridiculous. The egg juror? The egg juror was a big deal in the Murdaugh trial. This was a particular juror, not an alternate, note, because a lot of times there's like a regular amount of jurors, and then if jury attrition happens, somebody gets sick, they just cannot be off work anymore, they have an accident, etc., then they can lose a person, so they have alternates. This was an intended to deliberate, non-alternate seated juror. And the egg juror had been having conversations, which is completely not allowed, outside of the courtroom, saying her thoughts, talking about the case, things she's not supposed to do. Based at the time, it really seemed like she was just kind of being a gossiping busybody, and like didn't think that the little snippets of stuff she was saying were a big deal, and they were, and Judge Newman was not happy about it. But the reason why she's called the egg juror is because one of the other jurors has chickens and had brought a bunch of eggs for all of the other jurors because they had a lot of them. So when she was dismissed and said that she was no longer going to be serving on the jury and she was going to be relieved of her jury duty, she had asked the judge if she could go back to the jury room to get her eggs. And so, hence, she was called the egg juror. Well, it turns out there was a lot more to the egg juror and Becky Hill than initially brought up in court. There was a phone conversation and a text conversation that had come up where Becky Hill the juror had said, I have questions. Some people are leaning towards he's guilty, but I'm not sure. Like, how could you think he's anything but guilty, said Becky Hill to a juror. And it's like, why does a juror have your personal phone number or your work phone number, Becky? What are you doing, Becky? And then the egg juror was also saying, well, I have questions about the guns. And then Becky Hill had responded, and this was in the egg juror's affidavit, was that Becky Hill had said, you don't need to worry about the guns. The guns are gone. Just know that he is guilty, and we just need everyone on the same page. It'll just be easier for the floor person to take a show of hands, and we can be done. That is absolutely influencing the jury, trying to say that everything that Alex was saying was a lie, that the gun evidence, the missing guns that were the alleged murder weapon, just goofed off into the stratosphere. Don't worry about those. Don't worry about where they went, who had them, etc. That doesn't matter. Becky. And so, when Crane Waters was getting hit with that, it was, I'm going to agree with Emily D. Baker when she described it as a person getting yelled at by a parent. Just, yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. Because there wasn't anywhere else for him to go. There is no good explanation for why the county clerk is having a direct and clearly influential or egregious conversation with a juror. Now, if the juror had asked or said something along the lines of, oh, how long is this going to take? Oh, it's just however long it takes, you guys got to go through your evidence and you'll deliberate and it's just going to take however long it takes. Now, is that more conversation the county clerk should have? Yeah, technically. But is that egregious? No. Saying, oh, he's guilty, don't worry about the guns, forget about the doubt that you're having, juror who's there to determine if this person is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Don't worry about your reasonable doubts like the murder weapons. But I'm going to say that's pretty peach and egregious. It also doesn't help that one of the jurors that was sitting, because the egg juror was dismissed, she never got to deliberations. But it happened on a day that deliberations were supposed to take place. She was dismissed, and then an alternate was brought in. And of the 12 jurors who did deliberate, one of them did say to Judge Toole in the other trial for dismissal that they did feel influenced and impacted by Becky Hill's statements. Becky Hill has also been charged with perjury. Yes, she is already convicted. She said she was going into retirement, but it's more like, oh, you're a criminal and you have lost your position through your actions, contacting certain journalists, making sure in open court, it's first come, first serve. Except Becky Hill was making some little sneaky, cheeky reservations for journalists in exchange for, a little interview here and there. Oh yeah, I can get you in. Here are pictures of the bodies that are sealed. Yeah, here's some under seal pictures, photos, and things of evidence that the public is not supposed to see. Here you go, journalists, where your whole job is to put stuff into the public. What she said during the dismissal trial, she flat out lied to the judge, saying that she never did that stuff. She never showed photos and sealed exhibits to the journalist when she absolutely had. She got in trouble. There was an investigation. The emails came out, and she wrote a book. She wrote a book called Behind the Walls of Justice, the Alec Murdaugh trial. She was writing it as the trial was happening. And the book got out, and then it turned out that she had plagiarized a huge part of it. Because it would make for a better book sale if Alex Murdaugh was found guilty. Becky was also found to have been misusing court funds like child support funding, like where it was being held for collection, using that money to host personal events, buy personal lunches, and by events in the courthouse, I mean like birthday parties, baby showers, gifts, etc. And the the judges on the appeals court were saying, how can you not say that this is severely perversing justice? And Creighton Waters is just Becky Hill doesn't matter. She's not really important, and only one juror said that she did anything, and the other jurors were more influential, obviously, but the one judge pointed out that a defendant is not guaranteed 11 jurors that are unbiased. He has a right, or she has a right, to 12 unbiased, open-minded jurors. And he was not given that. And you could just see Creighton Waters shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. Yes, sir. He is just trying to move on, trying to put everything else out there, point out that the egg juror was not a deliberating juror, so what she has to say, and that she had been seen lying wills because she had been telling the judge, no, I didn't discuss this case with anyone, even though several times in a row she had been discussing the case with people. So he was trying to say, you don't believe the egg juror, she's just all around not credible. And he was saying, and Becky Hill was found to be not credible in some things, but more credible than others. I don't think it was as influential as the defense would like to make you think. I really do think that we are going to see Alex Murdaugh get granted a new trial, and a new trial with more financial restrictions in it. And we just have to wait and see for now, but it was not looking good for the prosecution. I will see you in the next video, my lovely humans. Mwah! And yes, another court video coming up.